I wasn't looking for secrets. I was just looking for a pack of batteries. But the moment I pulled open my husband's locked desk drawer, my entire marriage changed. Inside was a thick envelope with my name written across it in black ink. Beneath it sat an old passport with a different last name, a newborn hospital bracelet, and nearly $20,000 in cash. My hands froze as I noticed one final sentence written across the envelope: if Emma ever opens this drawer, don't let her read the last page. My name is Emma, and until that Saturday morning I believed my husband Mason was the most honest man I'd ever known. We had spent 12 happy years together in our quiet home outside Denver. We shared everything, or at least I thought we did. Mason had never lied about where he went, never hidden his phone, and never given me a reason to question him. But that drawer had always been locked. Mason claimed it held old work files that weren't worth looking at. Standing alone in his home office, staring at the envelope with my name on it, I realized he had been protecting something far more important. With trembling hands, I broke the seal, and the first sentence stole the air from my lungs. That I unfolded the first page, expecting to find a confession about another woman or hidden debt. Instead, the opening sentence left me completely speechless. Emma, if you've opened this drawer, it means I ran out of time to tell you the truth myself. My hands shook as I continued reading. Everything I've done over the last 12 years was to protect someone who never had a chance to protect herself. Before you judge me, promise you'll finish this letter. Protect who? The next page contained a small photograph that slipped onto the floor. I picked it up and stared at it. It showed Mason standing beside a little girl, no older than 6, smiling with one arm wrapped around his neck. I'd never seen her before. There was no name, no date, no explanation. Just beneath the picture rested the newborn hospital bracelet. The last name printed on it wasn't Mason's, and it wasn't mine. My heartbeat grew louder with every passing second. Just then, I heard the garage door opening. Mason was home nearly 3 hours earlier than usual. I barely had time to shove the letter back into the envelope before his footsteps started climbing the stairs. He wasn't supposed to be home, and I was still standing inside his office. I just slipped the envelope back into the drawer when Mason pushed open the office door. My pulse hammered so loudly I was certain he could hear it. He looked at me, then at the open drawer, and for the first time in 12 years, the smile on his face disappeared. Neither of us spoke. The silence was unbearable. Finally, he asked one quiet question. How much did you read? I wanted to tell him everything, but instinct took over. Nothing, I lied. His eyes searched mine for a long moment before he slowly closed the drawer and locked it again. Emma, he said softly, there are some truths that don't make life better. They only make it harder. Then, without another word, he picked up his car keys and walked back out of the house. Through the living room window, I watched him drive away in a hurry, something he almost never did. The moment his SUV disappeared around the corner, I rushed back upstairs. I couldn't stop now. The photograph, the bracelet, and that unfinished letter were all pointing toward a secret that had been buried for years. As I emptied the drawer completely, something small slid from underneath a stack of folders. It was an old silver key attached to a faded motel keychain. Taped to it was a handwritten note in Mason's unmistakable handwriting. Room 214. Never go there alone. I told myself I wasn't actually going to the motel. I just wanted answers. Yet an hour later, I found myself pulling into the cracked parking lot of a forgotten roadside motel on the outskirts of Denver. The faded sign flickered in the afternoon wind, and the place looked abandoned. My eyes searched until they landed on room 214. The silver key fit the lock perfectly. The room was silent. Dust floated through thin beams of sunlight coming from half-closed blinds. Nothing looked lived in anymore, but someone had carefully preserved everything. A small dresser stood against the wall, and on top of it rested a framed photograph. It was Mason. Only he looked nearly 15 years younger. Standing beside him was the same little girl from the picture I'd found in the drawer. This time she was laughing, holding a birthday cake, while a woman stood behind them with her hand on Mason's shoulder. The back of the frame held a folded note with trembling fingers. I opened it. If anything happens to me, promise you'll never let Emma discover what really happened that night. Before I could read another word, I heard slow footsteps outside the motel room. Someone stopped directly in front of the door. Then the doorknob slowly began to turn. The doorknob turned slowly, and I backed away, barely breathing. The door opened just enough for an elderly woman to step inside. She looked at me with tired eyes, but there was no surprise on her face. So, "You're Emma," she said quietly. I stared at her. "How do you know my name?" Instead of answering, she glanced at the photograph in my hands and sighed. "I prayed this day would never come." She introduced herself as Margaret. 4 years, she had managed the motel after her daughter passed away. The little girl in the picture, Lily, had stayed there whenever Mason visited. Margaret looked directly into my eyes before saying something I never expected. Mason isn't hiding another woman, she whispered. He's been hiding a promise. Before I could ask what she meant, she unlocked an old wooden cabinet hidden beneath the television. Inside were dozens of envelopes, hospital receipts, birthday cards, and photographs, all carefully labeled with different years. One envelope was newer than the others. Across the front, in Mason's handwriting, were 6 words that made my heart stop. Open this only if Lily disappears. At that exact moment, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Mason, but when I answered, a stranger's voice whispered, "You're too late." The stranger hung up before I could say a single word. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone. Margaret grabbed my arm and looked toward the motel window. "We have to leave. Right now." Yes, we hurried outside. A black SUV sped out of the parking lot. I caught only a glimpse of the driver before it disappeared onto the highway. Margaret turned to me, her face pale. "They've been searching for Lily for years. They believe she has something they can't afford to lose." I stared at her in confusion. "I don't understand. Who is Lily?" Margaret took a slow, painful breath. "She's Mason's daughter," she said quietly. "But she isn't the secret." She reached into her purse and handed me a worn leather journal. The first page was signed by a woman named Rachel. "If you're reading this, I didn't survive long enough to tell Lily the truth. The accident everyone believes happened 12 years ago wasn't an accident. Someone murdered my husband because of what he discovered, and now they're coming for our daughter." My heart stopped. Everything Mason had hidden wasn't protecting his past. He had been protecting Lily, a killer who had never stopped looking for her. Just then, Mason's SUV screeched into the motel parking lot. But he wasn't alone. A frightened teenage girl was sitting in the passenger seat. The moment Mason stepped out of the SUV, I ran toward him. Before I could ask a single question, the teenage girl climbed out behind him, her eyes filled with fear. She looked so much like the little girl in the photographs that I recognized her instantly. "Lily," I whispered. She nodded silently. Mason placed himself between us, scanning the empty parking lot before turning back to me. "We don't have much time," he said. "They know where we are." Margaret quickly handed Mason the leather journal. The color drained from his face the moment he saw it. "I prayed this would never be found," he murmured. Lily stepped closer and finally spoke. "My mom told me that journal could prove who killed my father. That's why they've been chasing you." My mind struggled to process everything. This had never been about an affair, hidden money, or a secret family. It was about protecting the only witness left alive. Suddenly, the sound of tires screeching echoed through the motel parking lot. 3 black SUVs surrounded the building. Men in dark clothing jumped out, moving toward us. Mason grabbed my hand with one hand and Lily's with the other. Then he looked me straight in the eyes. "Emma, whatever happens next, don't let go of her." Mason shoved Lily behind me just as the armed men rushed across the parking lot. "Run!" he shouted. We sprinted through the back of the motel while police sirens suddenly echoed in the distance. Someone had already called 911. One of the men caught up to us and reached for Lily, but Mason threw himself between them without hesitation. A struggle broke out, lasting only seconds before police officers stormed the parking lot and ordered everyone to the ground. Minutes later, the leader of the group was handcuffed beside his SUV. The journal Rachel had left behind contained every piece of evidence investigators had been missing for more than a decade. It exposed a powerful financial fraud that had led to her husband's murder and proved Lily had been the target ever since. The danger finally came to an end. Mason turned toward me with tears in his eyes. "I never lied because I stopped loving you," he whispered. "I lied because I couldn't risk losing either of you." I looked at Lily standing beside him and finally understood everything. The locked drawer hadn't hidden another woman. It had hidden a father's impossible promise, and the truth I feared would destroy our marriage became the very reason our family grew stronger than ever before.